Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 39. Whew, I'm excited for you. Got a good one for you here. In this episode, we are going to dive into a topic that is very, quite frankly, near and dear to my heart, and that is how to transition from graphic design to web design. And the reason I'm really passionate about this topic in particular is because that's the path that I took to get into web design. In fact, for those of you who listen to my story, if you haven't already, I'd encourage you to go back to listen to episode number 1, where I talk about my story going from a cabinet maker to being a drummer and then getting into graphic design and then transitioning into web design, because that's exactly what I did. And I'll tell you, I learned a lot of things the hard way, because going from print design, branding, and graphic design into web is just a whole nother ballgame. I found out there's a lot of complexities and a lot of different layers involved, and it was a struggle for me in a lot of areas. So we are going to help you get past all that and give you a solid plan of action for those of you who are in that situation. And for this topic, I brought somebody in who does exactly that. My guest from Down Under, Emma Kate, is a web dev mentor to graphic designers. She helps people going from print design and graphic design. She helps and guides them to getting into web, and she's awesome. This interview was great. What we do in this one is we cover a 9-step path that you can follow. It's a proven path that she lays out in a wonderfully designed PDF that will be available, by the way, in the show notes for this episode as a free download. But it's a path that you can follow to go again from graphic design to web design. And even if you're not a graphic designer and you're just getting into web design from a different industry, this will be really helpful for you as well. So I'm really excited for you. And you're going to love Emma. You know what's funny? You'll hear this in the episode, but Emma is kind of like the girl version of me. We found out that she got into Dreamweaver and hand coding websites like I did back in around the same time, around 2010. And then she discovered WordPress and Divi around the same time that I did. And then she grew a successful web design business, and just like me, is now starting to give back and now has this teaching business to where she helps graphic designers around the same time that I started this joshhall.co endeavor. And to top it off, my website is joshhall.co. She is at emmacate.co. So very, very cool. I had a blast talking with her. Really excited for you in this episode. Now, before we dive in, this one is brought to you by my recently launched SEO course. If you're going from graphic design to web design, chances are you probably are terrified of these 3 letters, SEO, because you're like, I don't know what it is. I don't know where to start. And that's exactly why I created my SEO course. It will walk you through the foundations and best practices with how to build your sites for solid foundation SEO. And then I'll show you all the most important things you need to know, because SEO is a massive, robust, complex topic. I'll show you all the important things you need to know to understand SEO and to how to make sure your sites are formatted and set up for best SEO practices. So if you're interested, make sure you check that out. I'll have the link below in the show notes to this episode, and I would love to help you in the wild, scary world of SEO through my SEO course. All right, guys. Well, without further ado, enjoy my episode with Emma Kate on transitioning from graphic design to web design. Enjoy. Emma Kate, welcome to the show. Awesome to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, first off, I said this before we went live, but thank you so much for getting up very early. It's just after 4 p.m. my time, but you are in Australia and it's 6 a.m. for your time.
Mm-hmm.
And I told you before live that you look great for 6 a.m. If I did a 6 a.m. interview, it would not be good news. So thank you so much for making the time at a weird time for us.
Oh, good. I don't have kids yet, so getting up this early is not something I'm used to. So I'm highly caffeinated at the moment, so fingers crossed I can keep it together.
Yeah, you said you're already on tea, right? You went from coffee and now you're already to tea?
I can't have more than 1 coffee a day, otherwise I just get too jacked. So I've had 1 coffee and now I'm on to tea, and yeah.
Nice. I'm already on my 3rd coffee in the afternoon, so we'll see how this goes. But yeah, I'm really excited to have you. We've been connected on Facebook for a little while now, and I did not realize how established you were or exactly what you did but you do something that is awesome. I'm a big fan of yours already. Not only because your domain is yourname.co, which so is mine. Your website is imitate.co. But you are helping people who are in a situation and something that I experienced myself, which is going from a graphic designer to a web designer. And I love your mission. I love what you're about. And I think what we'll do in this talk is, I know you've laid out like a nice PDF with kind of 9 steps to be able to do that effectively. And really excited to dive into that in this episode. Before we do, though, why don't you just give everybody just a down low on who you are, where you are, and what you do through your business.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I'm Emma Kate. I'm from Australia. I live in the beautiful Tweed Heads, Australia. And I'm, like Josh said, a graphic designer turned web designer. And I got into, WordPress fairly early on, and then eventually into Divi. And now I use what I know to teach other graphic designers who want to get into web, who are, just maybe doing print or branding design or something like that, and web really scares them, especially the whole development side and building. So I, was lucky enough to sort of figure that out, and now I have e-courses and stuff and to teach people how to do that.
That's awesome. Yeah, if you, you know what I think would be a great place to start, Emma, would be just a summary of your story. Like, what did that look like? Did you? Because I don't know how much you know about my story, but I went from graphic design in the band world, and then my church basically asked me if I was interested in running the website, and I was like, I guess I've never done that. And then that's what kind of started it, and then it just kind of spiraled from there. But what did that look like for you? What was your jettison going from graphic designer to web designer?
Yeah, sure. I went to uni and did graphic design. I thought, I want to build, design logos and brochures and things like that. And at uni, I learned, we sort of have 1 or 2 subjects on web design. And this was pre sort of WordPress. Maybe WordPress was only just kind of coming out. It wasn't big. So we learned some HTML and CSS and Dreamweaver. And so I was one of those abnormal designers that really liked the coding side. Not that I'm particularly good at it, but I just feel like a total geek when I can like code something in CSS. So I really got into that. And some of the first websites I built were in Dreamweaver, and were just like basic HTML, CSS stuff. You didn't need responsive design back then. They weren't mobile friendly because we didn't have iPhones and stuff back then. And then I think like my auntie was a web designer, and so she was like, oh, you should look at this new thing called WordPress, so I had a look at that. And eventually when I started, when I finished uni and started freelancing on the side, I started looking at building websites with WordPress. Because you could, clients were wanting something that they could, edit themselves, and you could sell these for a higher price tag than just like a basic kind of Dreamweaver HTML website. So I started doing that, but realized that WordPress was just a whole nother learning curve. I was familiar with sort of designing in Photoshop and then designing in and then building it out in Dreamweaver, but building it then in WordPress was like a whole nother ball game. So I used to just design in Photoshop, and then I had a developer and I'd give it to him and he would then put it all together for me. And we did this for many years until things like Divi came along. And that was just obviously probably for you too. And I know a lot of designers, it's such a game changer that, we don't need to rely on these hardcore web developers now to be able to build websites ourselves. We can harness the power of Divi and Elementor and things like that and be able to build websites ourselves. So that's what I've been doing, using Divi for the last maybe about 4 or 5 years. And that's what I sort of teach in my courses, that kind of process, being able to use a page builder or something like that to build websites.
Yeah, it looked like you were trying to make it very easy because, things can get complicated, but you can also do it from an easier perspective starting out, which is what's so great about Divi. You don't have to do CSS if you don't want to. But when you're ready, you can do it to take it to that next level. Yeah. And actually, I meant to ask, when were you in university? When were you doing the hand coding and Dreamweaver stuff?
I'm going to say I started that degree, I think 2008. So, and it took me, 2.5 years.
So we were right around the same time then, because when I started getting into web, it was Dreamweaver, and that was 2010. the end of
Okay.
2010. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's
we've been
probably, it
around
was
the
probably
same
my
time.
final year that I did that. So it was probably exactly the same time. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Now,
Mhm.
do you still do print work and graphic design yourself, or do you full time teach other graphic designers and stuff now? What does that look like?
So I made, like, at the beginning of this year, I had to politely and sadly, bittersweetly say goodbye to a lot of clients. So I kept like a handful of like 4 or 5 that I'll still do the occasional thing for, mostly web stuff. But if they need something, like a Facebook cover image or something, I'll do it for them because they're lovely clients that I've had for like 10 years, and I just, so I couldn't break their hearts. I couldn't break my heart saying goodbye to them.
Yeah.
But mostly, the bulk of my business is like now my sort of mentoring e-course side and teaching. But I do have, a handful of clients that I'll do some web work or even just a little bit of graphic design here and there.
Gotcha. What a great place to be in. I mean, the fact that you can kind of selectively choose the people who you want to work with is awesome. It's
Yeah.
so funny, Emma, because you're like the girl version of me. We started around the same time. We worked with clients for a decade, and then you're doing emmacate.co teaching designers, and I'm doing joshhall.co teaching web designers. So it's kind of funny. It's like a paralleled story, and I'm in the same boat. Like I'm being a little more selective right now, and then I'm not doing as much client facing stuff now. I'm kind of even more getting out of that side of the business. So
Hmm.
very cool. And what's really cool about this is I can tell that you're really passionate about what you do, and more importantly, giving back. Like your verbiage on your website is very clear that there's a mission behind it. I love your email sign off, just saying you want to make the web a better place. Like there's a lot of things in your messaging that are very clear. Um, I'm actually curious, before we dive into these steps from how people can practically go from a graphic designer to a web designer, where did I'm just out of pure curiosity on my end. What made you want to teach? Did you feel like you always liked teaching and that you always wanted to do this kind of thing? Or was there another passion behind it? What made you really want to give back the way you're doing right now?
The seed got planted with a couple of my graphic designer, web designer friends who I'd mentored. Like I'd kind of started my freelance business a few years before them, and just randomly just started mentoring them. We'd have like Skype chats and stuff, and every now and then, and I'd help them out, and I'd send them my email templates and my processes and how I did things. And they sort of planted the seed for me and were like, you're really good at this. What have you ever thought about sort of teaching or doing something like that? Because I was saying how it made me feel really good being able to help them.
Mm.
And so the seed sort of got planted a few years ago there. Shout out to Lou and Haley who did that for me. And then, so then it just sort of went from there, and it was an idea that I had in my head for a long time. And then I just, a couple years ago, went, okay, this is what I'm going to do now, and worked with a business coach to sort of get my courses and everything happening, and then new brand and all that kind of stuff.
Beautiful. How many courses do you have right now?
I have two, I guess. Like I have like a mini one that's like a mod, like a taster of the bigger course. So I guess like two,
Gotcha.
yeah. Hmm.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. I know you're producing some really valuable stuff. And that kind of leads us to getting started here with these 9 big tips that you recommend for designers. And what's interesting, I'm going to be a part of the summit that you're hosting here pretty soon, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And I think it sounds like my talk is going to be about conversion-based design for websites, which is different from print designs. That's one big struggle where people go from graphic designs where things are like flat to a website that's multidimensional. There's a lot of moving pieces. It has to work on different screen sizes. So I think a lot of designers get hung up on just the cosmetic aspects, which are really important. But I think what's most important is the goal of the design. A goal of a
Hmm.
business card design is different than a website. And that's your first tip, the goal. So what does that look like to you as far as how important the goals are?
Yeah, so I guess this isn't something that's unfamiliar to a lot of designers, because that's, for the beginning of any project, like you said, you figure out what are the client's goals for that particular thing. And so I like to include that. And even in my course, it's like a pre-work thing, because some people might already have their goals now, some people might not. Um, But for me, for a website in particular, you have sort of, I like to break it down into like 3 different audience goals. And so you've obviously got your target audience, so that, whoever the website is built for. So whoever, the ideal client or clients are, figuring sort of that out and what they want from the website is obviously super important. But then also what the business wants from the website. So the goals for the actual, business that you're working with, because that obviously it might be a marketing tool for them, but as we know with websites, that can also be like an automation tool, and like you can incorporate it into your systems and things like that with brief forms and stuff. So keeping all those things into consideration as well, how you can incorporate both of those goals, and also the goals of the business of what they actually want the ideal clients to do when they land there. Like, it's not just maybe that some people want a phone call, some people want them to fill out a quote form, some people, like it really depends on how that business wants to receive their leads.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah, here you go.
I was just going to say, because a lot of clients, sometimes they don't know. Like, sometimes when you're working with a client and they're making a website, they haven't gone through this kind of thing. They're just used to, particularly if I found with blue collar industries, whether it's automotive or construction or something, they just do their work and they get leads however they're used to getting leads. But when they're like thinking about their website, they're like, oh crap, I never really thought like, do I want a phone call, or do I want a contact form, or do I want to build an email list? Like, there are these different goals which definitely need to be talked out. And what I do in my proposals is I try to ask my questions to think about that. Like, think about, and you can have different levels of goals. I don't know if you, how you approach this with your students, but I've found that there are like first tier goals, like, which might be get a call or get a quote. And then the second tier goals might be read our blog or to sign up for a free download, or, like you said, some sort of automation process, or something else where they may have different types of funnels. So I think that's one thing where a lot of designers, print designers, or at least when I was in that world, there was pretty much one goal with every piece. It was like, it was either whatever you could fit on a design was what they were going to do. Whereas a website, you have the opportunity to put 100 goals on there if you want. So you almost have to figure out what's most important.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just like agreeing with what you said, I do the same thing with like the sort of, the main goals, and then what are some other sort of goals. So then you kind of, from that, you can then, when you get to the design stage, you can work out, okay, what are the main things that you've got, sort of your main calls to action, the top of the page, and the big real estate, the biggest real estate section of your page kind of thing. And then, you have the secondary goals and stuff like that throughout. So yeah, definitely important to keep all of them in mind, and trying to extract them from your client, I think is the I guess it's not that hard if you know the right questions to ask and you have a client that's willing to give you that sort of information. And following on from that too, I have like a brief form I get clients to fill out at the beginning, before I've even quoted on a job, to get this idea from them. Because if they can't really give me that information, or they feel like it's a tedious exercise, then they're probably not the best client, because you're never going to create exactly what they want, because they don't know what they want. So
yeah, or they're going to be terrible to work with if they just don't give you anything and expect the website to be done.
and expect to love it and it'd be perfect. So
yeah, no, that's a good point. And then I know one thing you talk about too is target audience, like figuring out, because that's the other big thing. The goals may be different for different audiences, who are people who are, or customer segments who are looking at the website. So do you have any tips or tricks for figuring that out? Like, do you recommend working with clients and figuring out, what the best customer is, and then morph the call to action to them, and then have secondary goals? Or what does that look like as far as like a target audience perspective?
Yeah. So like, for example, if they had like kind of 2 different ideal client kind of audiences that would be coming to the same website. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I like a popular example is like realtors. They have buyers and sellers. It's really 2 different paths they could go down on the website. But a lot of my clients, like, we work with a eye surgical place, and they had a few different types of customers. They had one that like was an emergency. They have a problem with their eye, but then they have people who are curious about remedies or help. But then there's other people who are looking for different types of information. So yeah, I was curious, like, what you recommend as far as figuring that out to help clients.
Yeah. So I guess it's just really, it's asking those questions, seeing how much you can narrow it down, seeing if you can kind of split it up into 2 or, max sort of 3 different kind of user journeys, I guess you're going to have on the website. And potentially they're all going to be on the same level rather than, mainly targeting emergency eye surgery or whatever, and, targeting people that are curious. There's going to be the same amount of people with those things coming to the website potentially. So I guess it would just be the benefit of a website is you can have a lot of different links and buttons and things going on. So you can be, splitting that up, and I just like to make it really obvious on the website which thing a different type of ideal client should click on, not overcomplicate it, make it really clear from the get-go. If you need emergency eye surgery, click here, or if you're a buyer or you're a seller with real estate, which sort of thing to go down. And I'm sure you probably have a lot of tips there because you obviously are very into conversion design and stuff like that, and that's one of the first places people go. So
yeah, I totally echo what you just said there. I like the term that you use, user journey, and that is a great way to picture what's happening on a website. It really needs to be a journey if it's going to convert, and if you're going to get somebody's information or really get them to take the next step, it has to be a journey. So, and I totally agree. Yeah, I think what you said, the 2 or 3 main paths, I would definitely not do more than that as far as like main call to actions, because then it's just too confusing. People don't know what to click on. So that's great though, as far as being able to narrow that down. And I think the really cool thing about that is you don't have to do that on the first design of the site. I mean, ideally you would, but these are things you can revamp and look at ongoing too, I found with clients.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because even once you've built the website, you've launched it, and then a year down the track, their business might change a little bit, or they might realize something new about their audience or something. And that's a great thing with web compared to printing an expensive 20-page brochure, is that you can just do a few quick updates and it's all changed. So.
Yes, that's a great point. That is definitely a huge benefit of going to web, despite the struggles of dealing with some painful, coding mishaps or browser compatibility and stuff like that. It makes up for it when, you don't have to get a whole nother 1,000 brochures reprinted when you just got a new service or something. So yeah, that's
absolutely.
Awesome. And that leads us to number 2. And by the way, this PDF, I'll make sure everyone has a link to it to where they can check this out and follow along if they want to, because it's great and it's designed beautifully. It's awesome. But that is the pages, which you kind of talk about as the goods. And one thing I like that you talk about in this is not only creating a site map or a roadmap for all the main pages, but also the hidden pages, which I'm a big fan of. I have a whole section in my business course about hidden pages that I have in my site that no one else is going to find unless you knew about them. So yeah, what does that look like for you? I love that you're keen on that. And then do you have any ideas and tips on creating a nice roadmap and then, optimizing for SEO and stuff like that?
So with the like creating the sitemap, it's like you said, like getting people to think about, okay, what are the actual hidden pages you're going to need? Because people just typically go home about contact, service 1, service 2, that kind of thing. But then really thinking about, okay, well, if you've got an opt-in, then you're going to want a thank you page, because obviously that helps with your, just tracking your Facebook pixel, and knowing things are converting, stuff like that. But then you might have, like brief form pages, I think is a typical one. So, in my Be the Boss course, it's mainly for designers, and it's teaching them how to build their own website first and foremost before they sort of start building for clients. So for, a lot of my students, when they go through that part, it's figuring out, okay, what brief forms do I want to have on my website? Which ones are they sending via PDF now or something? And maybe they want to put it on their website as a form. So thinking about that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And just like maybe some hidden pages, like even like I know on your website you have an awesome like page with all the videos that you send to your clients on your In-Transit Studios one. Yeah, I like to put that as a reference. I show my students that all the time. So I'm like, you should
awesome.
have them like this on your site.
Just this little client resources page with a bunch of tutorials. Yeah.
Yeah, which is great, and so that's kind of an idea too, is, what are some potential things that like that would be hidden pages. You're not going to have them on your sitemap necessarily. They're not going to be in the main menu. So thinking about that. And then also the legal pages that you're probably going to need as well.
Yeah.
But one tip that I have to make it less overwhelming for people, if you're building your own site, or even I do this with clients if they maybe don't have the budget or the time to get everything right, is we put together like an MVP sitemap, like a most minimum viable product. I think that's how you say it, like sitemap.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, what pages do you absolutely need to launch? What can we just like put together to like get it out there, rather than, because you might do your initial brain dump of all the pages and there's 20 pages and you're like, this is just too much to put together for the client's budget. Or if you're building it for yourself, for instance, like going through the course, you want to get your website up in 8 weeks, maybe building 20 pages is like a big ask. So just going, okay, I just need home, about, portfolio, contact, and then I'll be good to go, or something.
What a great tip. Yeah, that's awesome. And that is a huge benefit when it comes to getting a project done on time, because I've had situations in the past where we might have the site like done and ready to go, but then the client's hung up on 2 blog posts that they're writing. I'm like, look, we can launch it and then you can worry about that, or you could tweak it later. Like some of that does not matter right now. Or I mentioned this in a couple courses, and more recently in my SEO course, because this is something that you can use as additional ongoing SEO work. And that is to create additional pages in like a phase 2. So like you said, maybe the first build is a homepage, the main services, and then about us, contact, privacy policy, and all that stuff. So maybe it's like a 10-page site. But then phase 2 could be done right after, or maybe 3 months down the road. Then you add more service pages for like each individual service. Maybe that makes like 8 additional pages there. So it can be ongoing work. You add on to this site. It's great for SEO. Google thinks the site is alive because you're adding on to it. A lot of good things like that. And it stems from what you're talking about, which is that pro tip of like, don't worry about doing every single page right up front. Do the main ones and then build on from there. I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like a lot of designers, we're perfectionists as well. And I know if I ever waited for my websites, like for personal websites that I built for myself, if I waited for them to be perfect, I wouldn't have a website. They're always a work in progress. And they're always, it's like, near enough, something is better than nothing, just getting it out there, and you can always tweak. And again, that's just the benefit of the web, because you can just get it out there and then you can completely restyle it, add more, delete, like all that stuff, compared to making a final decision on a big, brochure that you're going to design for yourself or something.
Yeah. So. A good website launched is better than a perfect website that's in the works for 3 years. So
yeah, exactly.
I call it the damn good rule. It's like, you know what, if it's damn good, launch it. Like it's not going to be perfect, but that's the thing that every designer struggles with. It's like, oh, it's just not perfect, but by golly, if it's good enough, just get it up there and then go from there. Because chances are clients aren't going to notice the teeny little minute things that designers are painstakingly going over, hours and hours over. So
absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah. And also I guess the benefit is too that, it's great to have it out there, like you said, for SEO. If you've got something out there, it can start getting indexed. It takes a lot of time for Google to start seeing pages and ranking them. So if you wait a whole year for it to be perfect, then you're a year behind. If you'd sort of launched a year earlier with just 5 pages, at least you've got something out there getting indexed,
even 3 months. I mean, even 3 months of like, if you waited, if you drug your feet and just nitpicked over something over 3 months, that's 3 months you could have got better Google rankings, or at least started the foundation to then start getting better Google rankings. And yeah, I had a big videography friend who went through, I think, 3 designers and like completely different styles of his website, and ended up just never launching it. It took like a year and a half and he just didn't launch it because he just couldn't get it right. I'm like, dude, just launch something. It's just crazy. But yeah, it's huge. And that really, now that we're kind of talking about that, the design, that kind of leads us to point number 3, which talking about design and style. I mean, what's cool about design in general, and I think one area where designers have a leg up on developers who maybe really struggle with an eye for design, is that there are a lot of just basic design principles that do transfer pretty well. Color
Mhm.
theory, color management, typography, hierarchy, all these things are just basic general principles that I know for me personally, I was able to apply from print to web. But how do you talk to students about that? Because it is different. There are differences, even though there's a lot of things that transfer. Things are different online than they are just in pure graphic design. So yeah, what would you say that would help people bringing their design chops from print to web?
Yeah, absolutely. While I just remember it too, though, can I just circle back to the goals and just quickly say we missed the
Oh, sure.
third one just because I'd said that there were three and then I realized I'd just
Mm,
only said two. So I'll
I'm
just
so glad
quickly
you
say
mentioned that.
that.
Absolutely.
So just quickly, the third one with web that's probably a little bit different is thinking of the editors of the site. So who's actually going to edit the website? So often this will be your client, and thinking about what they're going to need to change on the site. So
Mm.
that's an important thing to consider at the beginning with the goals because, if it's, say, a real estate website and they're going to need to be updating new property listings and stuff like that, then you're going to want to make that really easy for them. You're not going to want that to be like hard coded or, lots of inline HTML going on that they have to avoid or stuff like that. So I think that's an important thing to consider early on as well.
Great point. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I would have listened back to this and I would have been like, get back to number three, get number three.
So
um,
that's all I need to say on that, but I just
that's
wanted to
great.
mention it. That's all.
That's great.
Uh,
Yeah. And then, when we're talking about design, yeah, because that is a struggle, I think it catches designers off guard when they start designing for web. And it's like, oh, wow, there's a lot more to think about, quite frankly, when it comes to web, I feel like. So, yeah, how do you empower your students to go from print design or graphic design to web as far as the design goes?
Yeah. So I guess that's one thing. Like with me, I don't really teach people how to design. It's more translating those graphic design, print design skills to web and what
Mm.
the fundamental differences are. So obviously, you have to consider the different color, like RGB versus CMYK and stuff like that. Image resolutions is obviously a huge thing as well, which a lot of designers make that mistake and upload 5 meg images to their
Oh,
website.
sure. Yeah.
You probably see that a lot. But I think, I think the hardest thing for print-based designers than going to web is the responsiveness. And it is a hard thing because you're not just designing for one size, you're designing for an infinite amount of sizes and browsers. And so you kind of have to, a lot of the time, tone down your designs
That's a good point.
because they're just not going to, unless you want to put in a whole bunch of media queries and making it all different everywhere, you're going to just want to simplify it so it all sort of scales down quite well. So I think that's the hardest thing to get your head around to begin with. But I think once you start using tools like Divi, you can kind of see how things are going to translate and you just sort of get used to it, I guess.
Yeah, and one thing I've learned with that is same thing. I really struggled with that, and then I made my life much more difficult by having these really advanced desktop designs that were overlapping. Once I got really good with CSS and was doing a lot of different stuff, and then yeah, it was like on tablet it was just a mess, and on mobile it was maybe with Divi and other page builders they align nicely, but then your page is like 200 scrolls if you have a lot of elements.
Mhm.
What I've learned to do is to really really put my designs in a place to where they'll work just about the same on desktop and tablet, maybe a couple differences here or there, and then mobile, same thing. I'll try to arrange things either specifically for mobile or I'll turn certain elements off, which most builders do. Like Divi, you can have
Mhm.
9 testimonials in a section on desktop, but then maybe 3 on mobile. That way there's less scrolling. Little
Mhm.
things like that have really helped, I know, for me. But yeah, I totally agree. That's the tricky part for sure, going from print to
Yeah.
web.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And being a designer and wanting it to be all super duper fancy and beautiful and realizing maybe like, which is awesome. But I think, yeah, sometimes less is more. It's just going to save you less headaches down the track and less things ending up on the page where you don't necessarily want them to be.
Yeah, and I know one thing I've tried to do is like if I really do want to get, fairly complex with one like in hero image or the top of a website or something, I may do that on one section, but then the rest of the page I'll take it easy just to make my life
Mm.
easier instead of going
Yeah.
ham on every section. Um, which you can in some ways if the budget's there or depending on the design, but like an auto mechanic site does not need to be terribly wild with design.
Yeah.
Going back to
Yeah.
the goals, people are going to, I think one really important thing to remember too is from a design perspective, I'll probably talk about this in the summit, but people scan websites. They don't read it exactly like they would a brochure, unless it's a blog post or some piece of content that is meant to be read in detail or a tutorial. Main pages, home pages, service pages, they are scanned. So you really need to set your design up to be scanned quickly. Bullet points, numbered icons, stuff like that. You can still do a good amount of content, but just make it pleasing to the eye. I know those are some things that have helped me or that are different than print, where you can be a little, you could design differently for print if it's like a brochure or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things too with websites, rather than just like, and it comes a lot down to copywriting as well. But sometimes you might just get from the copywriter, you might just get a whole big page of text, and you've got to then break it up. It's just similar with layout design, though, I guess too. You've got to break it up in a way that's visually, appealing and easily scannable. The main points are highlighted, things like that, rather than just dumping it all on the page. But one thing I do see a lot on websites is having like text sort of spanning the whole width of the page in a way, and
Mm.
it just looking like a big sort of dump of text. And I do like to, like, one tip I actually learned at uni many years ago is to have sort of like a max of about 13 to 15 words per line. When you're sort of, so whether that means you sort of make the gutter for the text, like the space maybe 700 pixels wide rather than the full 1,000 or whatever you set your
Yeah.
width to, or making the font bigger or whatever it might be, just makes it sort of easier to scan. Or even like columns, with Divi and Elementor and stuff, you can easily do columns of text. Something that just makes it easier on the eye than some websites you go to and you've got to track the whole width of the page with all the text.
That's a great design tip. That's not one that I've really thought about. So what'd you say? 13 to 15 on average is probably a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, I think they say, like 8 to 13 is ideal, but sometimes I'm like, push it to 15 or something, because
Yeah.
it is a bit hard when you've got massive monitor screens and only going to have this much text.
Yeah.
But having an
That's a
image on the side or something like that, you can always lay it out nicely.
Yeah, and I know with like blog posts, a lot of times you'll have a sidebar, so it'll probably realign to be about that width anyway. But you're
Mm.
right. Like I've dealt with that on my sites where I have like a full width section, but then the words is probably like 30 words wide. And you're exactly right. That is awful. It's like a textbook
Mm.
from like elementary school or something, or like high school or something, where you're like, oh god, it's just awful to read. So
Mm.
that's a great point. Yeah, yeah. Limit the amount you're reading on one line. I think it's a great design hack.
Yeah, yeah. It's just
Yeah.
something I learned, like I said, uni like 10 years ago, but it's really, I find it really handy. And I do notice it, and you'll probably, now that I've mentioned it, everyone listening to the podcast, every time you see this now,
We're
you'll be
all
like,
gonna see
oh,
it.
that's
Yep.
so hard to read.
Yeah, we probably didn't even
Mm.
realize why it was so hard to read. And
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of us have, like, I'm sure I have some pages on my site where I'm like, oh man, I've got 40 words stretching out there. So
Yeah. Everyone's going to be like, quick, got to edit my website.
yeah. And for people who read, like that's the kind of how we're programmed to read, is books are probably about that length long, like maybe 15 words long, and then it goes down to the next line. So
Mm,
that's a
yeah.
great point. And
Mhm.
okay, so we talked about some fun stuff, but we got to talk about some unfun stuff, and that's the foundations. Number 4, the thing that every graphic and print designer dreads: domains, email, hosting. How do you help your students through this kind of thing? Because I mean, each one of these topics could be their own courses. So how do you break it down in its simplest form for people who are just like, I don't even really know what to do or what's involved with all this?
Yeah, yeah. That's the scary stuff. And this is the stuff that really prevents a lot of designers getting into web. I think like the second they start hearing hosting, SSL, installing WordPress, they're just like, oh no, kill me now. Like, not going to do that. And what I found too was there wasn't many courses out there that really taught the whole process. You know, there's a lot of courses specifically, you know, a lot of free tutorials just on Divi or, you know, just on little things, but that like putting it all together, actually going and realizing what you need. You know, I think that was just a huge barrier for, I know a lot of my design friends, because I had a lot of graphic designers, web designers coming to me and getting me to build their websites. And I was like, you guys can do this. Like, you know,
Yeah.
so the way I do it is really go through the process. So firstly, choosing a domain name. You know, how do you choose the best domain name? I actually, confession, I'm pretty sure joshhall.co, I got emmacake.co because I saw your joshhall.co and I was like, I need a domain that's short and sweet because my last name's
that's
Patterson.
awesome.
And you can spell Patterson a million different ways. And I just didn't want people getting it wrong.
I would have never found your website trying to spell Patterson out.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, and also as a designer, I couldn't get a logo Emma Patterson working as good as I could Emma Kate. So
yeah, Emma Kate just sounds cool. Like the syllables dun dun dun, like 1, 2, 3, just work. Like I kind of wish I wish mine had the same syllables as yours did because like joshhall.co is just missing something. But if my name was like ... co or you know ... blank co, I think it would sound
okay. Oh yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, I'm honored that my website inspired you. So that's pretty cool. Because I went back and forth as far as what I wanted to do, and I was like, you know what? It's my personal brand. I'm going to keep it personal. I was going to do like the Divi web design dude or Divi dude and all this stuff. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep it joshhall.co, and then I can change it later if I ever want to. But it's awesome to have a personal brand like that.
I think so too, and you don't really get sick of it, I find as well, because it's your name. Like, you know, it's like you Divi dude, you might in a few years go, oh, why did I do that? You know, like with any kind of branding name. Like I even find that with my client services business. I'm like, why did I call it Ola? No one can spell or pronounce.
You know
Ola.
what?
Like,
and that's and that's a great point to think about when you're talking about a domain name. Is you don't want to limit yourself. I mean, like I use nothing but Divi. But a lot of my students use Elementor and some of these other builders. So if I was just a Divi designer, a lot of those people probably wouldn't be with me because they're like, well, I don't use Divi. But the majority of my content, a lot of it can work with other builders as well. Like my web design process course, it's not Divi specific. My SEO course is not Divi specific. The design course is not Divi specific. I use Divi in the courses to, you know, to walk people through the design, but it can be done on different platforms. So definitely something to think about before bottlenecking yourself. Yeah, or
definitely.
even I know some people do it in their area. They'll do like I live in Columbus, Ohio, so if it was like Columbus web design, well, what if we move one day and then it's like, crap, I'm not even in Columbus anymore. I've seen that happen before where people have to like completely change their domain because it's an area.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that was a benefit back in the day, and you used to see lots of people do it because it was like SEO benefits and stuff. And I'm not an SEO expert, so correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but I don't think that held as much weight as it used to.
No, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. I have clients all the time that are like, hey, I just purchased Columbus. Actually, somebody just recently was like, hey, I purchased Columbus Home Inspector and I want to take my site to that domain. And I'm like, oh, hold up. We have all the domain authority built up on your brand name. Like, you can't do that. And they're like, well, what if I just post, you know, can I just have this redirected to my site so it'll show up first on Google? I'm like, it's not the way it works. There's like, there's really no value to that name. So yeah, I mean, you know, if you're for sure going to do a service that's just in an area, like for good, you could do that, but I think it's still better to have your name, your business name. And then you can keyword the area and the title and stuff around it.
Absolutely.
But I didn't mean to derail us, but that's the big thing. The domain, figuring out a good domain, hosting, and really email. I mean, those are the three main aspects, right? Is that kind of what you tell your students?
So it's choosing a domain name first and foremost. So like we were saying, short and sweet, easy to spell, unambiguous, those kind of things. Working out the right domain extension as well, because a lot of people are like, should I use .com, .co, or like, you know, for instance, in Australia, we have .com.au, there's
Oh,
.co.uk,
yeah.
there's different. So when do I use that? When do I use .com? So figuring out when that's appropriate as well. So what domain you're going to want to register there. So there's a whole bunch of sort of tips, and I have a blog post on my website, and if you just Google tips for learning what to think of in a domain name or something like that, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff. So there's just making it really easy, I guess. Short and sweet and easy to spell is the biggest thing, because the last thing you want to have to do is spell it to everyone that you say it to,
Yeah.
which is what I find in my other business. So definitely don't do that. And then there's the hosting. So I think one thing that you probably come across a lot too is lots of people go, oh, I'm just going to get the cheapest hosting. Why would I spend really a lot of money on this hosting when I can get it for $1 over there?
Yeah.
And it's not till something bad happens that people realize why you pay for decent hosting. And decent hosting doesn't have to be expensive. I really like SiteGround, and I
Same
find
here.
they're this for the service they provide. I feel like they're so cheap. So, I think there's sort of no reason not to go with a good host. And and then and learning about hosting, I guess that's teaching people what that is sort of part of the course, and part of something that you're then going to have to explain to your clients, because clients are often like, why do I have to pay for this every year? So
Right. Yeah. And print designers, I know when I got into it, I was like, I have no idea about anything. I didn't even really realize that the website files were stored somewhere to show up online. I just didn't have any idea about that, because I was so stuck in my print mindset. But yeah, SiteGround is great. And then I have a whole course on cPanel, which is why that's so important. To your point earlier, you were saying there's not really too many resources on that. I totally agree. That's why I built that course. I'm like, there's no, you could find all the information out, but it's buried in blog articles on all these different sites. I'm like, I just created a simple 12 lesson course that walks you through domains, email, hosting, SSL, all of that boring stuff. I try to make it as fun as possible and scary stuff, because you can, as I'm sure you've seen and your students have seen, you can just completely blow up a website, and you can disconnect email or lose email. I've done that a couple times in the past, where I changed the record and I didn't know that my client's email was hooked to it, and their email disappeared. So there's terrible things that can happen, which is why you need to know about that. But luckily, it's not rocket science. You get to know the basics, and you're going to be all right from there. And then you'll look like an expert, and you'll look like a total badass with your clients. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, I really, I love that you have that course, and I've referred a couple of people to that on occasion, because, oh, you just froze for me. Hopefully
I got you back. Yeah. You froze for a second there too, Emma, but I got you back now. So I think we're good.
Okay. Did my audio come through fine?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, yours did too, but your face just froze.
Hopefully it wasn't a flattering. It usually frozen when I'm like.
Oh, that's what I get on Facebook Lives. It's just always the worst image that it picks on a Facebook
Oh, I'm
Live.
sure, being in Australia too. I know your guys' internet is not known for the fastest stuff.
It is terrible, especially with all this COVID stuff now, and everyone being at home, everyone using the internet. It's just horrendous.
Oh, shoot. Yeah. Yeah, so the hosting stuff, but I mean, that's like I said, I have my course on that. There's also a lot of great resources. SiteGround is what we both recommend, which is great. And then the other aspect is email. I know it sounds like you recommend G Suite, which is what I use as well. Can't recommend that enough, because you get, if you host your email on your hosting, there's some problems with that. You'll find pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And I've learnt those problems the hard way over the years for myself and for my clients. And I find, especially if you're just starting out, you're just registering a domain, you're just buying your hosting, setting up your email with G Suite, or even I use G Suite personally, I like it, but even just any separate email hosting, whether that's Office 365 or some hosting companies have separate email only hosting as well. So just having your email separately from the get-go saves a lot of headache down the track with the transfer, but also I just had this issue with a client, like, your website gets hacked and your emails then impacted,
Yes,
and
because it's on the
like,
same server, and yeah.
yeah, and your emails start ending up in spam, and it can just cause huge issues, and it runs into your, obviously, like, your bandwidth. I don't know if I'm saying the right word. I'm not as technical with cPanel like you are, but
yeah, well, you're totally right. It takes up
yeah.
the storage and the space on your server. Yeah.
Yeah. So all those things that it's just, like, pay the extra $60 a year it costs for G Suite and just do it. Like, it's so
Right.
much handier. And I find, even I used to use, like, when you use just IMAP or pop email or something like that, I used to find if I was trying to access it on my phone and I was using different internet connections, like when I'm on holidays or something like that, then I couldn't send emails. I could only receive or something. I used to have those issues all the time when I was just using my sort of like email that was attached to my website hosting account. You move to something like G Suite and all those issues just disappeared. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I'm on board with all that. And next, now that we've passed the unfun stuff, now we can talk about some things that are a little more fun, much more fun actually, and that's the actual tools. Like, what do we want to build these websites with? I'm sure I'm looking through this, and we use the exact same tools: WordPress, Divi, Manage WP for managing all of our sites, for doing updates. Now, do you use just Divi exclusively, or do you use Elementor and any other builders as well?
Personally, I just use Divi. In my course, I don't similarly to you. I don't make people just use Divi. That if they want to use Elementor or Beaver Builder or something like that, that's fine. But yeah, personally, I've played around with both of those, but I've just stuck with Divi. That's what I love and I'm familiar with. So
yeah, I just saw like part of me was kind of like smugly smirking when a lot of people in my Divi web designers group are still in the group, but they've gone to Elementor or whatever, and they come in on comments and they'll be like, yeah, Divi sucks. I moved to Elementor and things have been great. And then I just saw last week that there was like a breach of like 90,000 sites or something like that got hacked through Elementor. So part of me was like, well,
wow.
everything is good here. So but yeah, I mean, it really is. It's a big thing once you get into web. It's because your tools are what you're going to build everything on. Similarly, if you're doing print design, you're using Illustrator or InDesign or Photoshop. Like, you really need to learn how to be proficient with those. So yeah, I mean, apart from those big three: WordPress, Divi, and then Manage WP or any other recommended plugins, is there anything else you recommend to your students as far as the tools go?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Like, obviously there's certain plugins that I would use for different things, but yeah, the bulk of it is WordPress, Divi, or a page builder of choice. And a theme potentially to go with it. If you're using Elementor, then you're going to need a theme attached to it, obviously. But yeah, and then Manage WP, which is just a lifesaver.
It is awesome, isn't it? I can't believe how cheap it is.
I know. It's crazy. And it's been like free for the last couple of months with all this COVID
that's
stuff
right.
too.
Yeah. Because I think we're managing between my maintenance plan and then all of my sites and my course sites and stuff. I think we have 90 some sites on there, and I do backups and updates, and it's like $130 a month or something crazy. It's wild. It's a terrible business model, but I'm glad.
I know. And I think it's so fantastic too. And I know you have a course on it doing website care plans. Like, my website care plans pre-managed WP were like, it take me probably a good 40 minutes to do. And now I can, if granted nothing goes wrong, I can knock out a website monthly maintenance in like 10 minutes. Like, it's just so easy.
I neglected doing one, for one, because I just didn't have a mind for business or recurring income. And then also I didn't know there was a tool like that. And I was like, man, I do not want to have to log into 30 different websites one at a time to do updates. That sounds awful. And then I saw Manage WP for the first time and I was like, holy crap, it's a whole new ball game now. I mean, there's other ones too. There's
Updraft.
what's the other? Yeah, Updraft, and there's another popular one.
WPME Dev?
Yeah, that one. There's one more too. There's one more. I forget what it's called. I
Can't think of
forget,
it.
but yeah, there's quite a few like that are similar. But yeah, I personally love Managed WP, even though it got purchased by GoDaddy. They've still been awesome for me. So definitely do
Yeah,
it.
I found they've been on a slow decline. I'm hoping they'll pick up again. But yeah, they have been mostly awesome. And I find using them with SiteGround, they work quite like almost perfectly. It's only when I go with some other random host for some reason, if a client's with a different host, then I tend to run into some issues with like, cloning and things like that.
Yeah, which is why I have my free tutorial on manually migrating a WordPress website for anyone who needs to watch that to get a good
Oh,
understanding.
I need to watch that.
That will help. It'll help you for
Mm.
sure, because there's really only a few components that you need to know. So that'll be helpful for you,
Cool.
hopefully.
Oh,
Now
definitely. I'm Googling that after this chat.
Oh, awesome. Yep. Yeah. Just search manually transfer webs or manually migrate website WordPress, and
Okay.
you'll probably
Cool.
find me.
Awesome.
So I kind of merged 5 and 6 together, because 6 is where you talk about what you call the secret weapon, which is Divi.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'll rephrase the question. When students are asking you about what a theme is and then why they should use Divi, what do you tell them? Because as you and I know, there's a lot more benefits than just the theme itself. There's the community, there's Elegant
Mm.
Themes itself. There's so many things around Divi. Yeah, what do you tell people when they ask you about that?
Well, I think, yeah, so like as a tool, I think honestly, Elementor is a great tool as well. But one of the huge benefits of Divi, I find, firstly, is the community, is Facebook groups like your Divi Web Designers group, and a bunch of the Divi specific groups out there. In Australia, we have one called Aussie Divi Community, and I find that really helpful.
Yeah, I just joined that a couple of weeks ago, actually, even though I'm not in there.
How are
The
you
owner,
allowed in?
the owner, I know, right? I told her, the owner reached out, and she was like, "Hey, if you want to join," I'm like, "Well, I'm not in Australia." I said, "I'll think about it," but I didn't want to break the rules or anything.
Yeah. I have some students and they're like, I want to join that group, and I should see if they can join because they're in like Chicago and places like that, and they can't join the
Australia-ish.
Aussie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the community I find is awesome. The amount of like the plugins and free tutorials and stuff like that is just I love that there's just so much out there that you can do with it. You can sort of find something for anything. Also, and then there's other factors like that you just have to install the theme and the page builders in the theme. With Elementor, you do have to think about a theme, and then you've got the plugin, and it's sort of just like those extra kind of things you have to think about.
Gotcha.
And also a benefit with running your like a web design agency is that you can get the lifetime deal as well, which is pretty epic, that you could just build it on unlimited websites. And once I
Yeah.
realized I was committed to Divi, I was like, I'm just buying lifetime and you never have to pay for it again. So.
Another terrible business model, Elegant
Yeah.
Themes. Come on,
Yeah,
guy. I just can't believe
absolutely.
it's freaking, what is it, 270 some bucks for the lifetime? At least
Yeah.
USD, it's 270 or yeah, something like that for lifetime. It's just crazy. Yeah, I would pay
Yeah.
thousands for Divi. It's that important to my business. So
I know.
yeah,
I
it's
want them
wild.
to release something else, and I'm like, I'll just pay for it even if I don't need it, just to give you some more money. Hey, because like I feel like I'm stealing off my
It
users.
really is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Um,
that's a great point though. The community and everything, apart from just the builder itself and the features, which are amazing and they're continuing to get great. I mean, look, no theme is perfect. There are bugs occasionally, and if there ever is any issues with Divi, I find that they do updates very quickly to remedy those. The problem with that is when you get into adding other plugins and other things that may conflict with it. That's like it's a little tricky there. But Divi itself is very solid and very well thought out and thorough. So. Um,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
And
both
I
of our
think,
businesses, we've relied on it for what, 5, 6 years, it sounds like. I got into it in
yeah.
2014. So,
Yeah. I don't know when exactly I got into it, but it was, yeah, it would have been Divi 1 point something, I think. Like,
yeah.
and yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, it was. It's been it's been a great tool, and just seeing how it's evolved too. I think that's one huge benefit I find with Elegant Themes and Divi is that they're so proactive in creating new features. They're like constantly creating new features. They have their sort of finger on the pulse of what needs to be done. They're releasing awesome content and blog posts and tutorials, and like, you know, just the thorough documentation too, I find is, you know, like their step-by-step tutorial videos that they have for every module that they have is fantastic. Like even when I recommend, you know, the different page builders to students, Beaver Builder in particular, they just don't have very good tutorials, especially for beginners.
Gotcha.
You know, like Elementor, they're pretty good now, and they do have quite a lot. But I find if you're just starting out in web, you want those. I know I love video tutorials and step-by-step kind of guides like that. So I find, you know, the whole documentation section of Divi and all the blog posts that, you know, you and other people write on the Elegant Themes
I was
blog,
just going to say, yeah. And then, yeah, the contributors, and then also, you know, people like myself and Divi Space and Divi Life and Divi Lover and everyone who are doing their own type of tutorials in and around Divi. It's invaluable because then you get to see other ways to use Divi, which through the lens of different people, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I get heaps of ideas from that. And yeah, I think that's just, it's invaluable to me, let alone if you were just starting out and trying to learn these things. So
Yeah.
I think that's definitely a huge benefit of Divi.
That's great. And so to number 7, building the actual website. This could be several episodes in itself, so I'm sure we'll just glance over some of the top stuff. And I figure we'll kind of cook through the last few here. But the build, like, it's probably so hard when somebody is going from graphic design to web. I feel like the biggest thing is to just prioritize the most important things. And I imagine that's your approach on this too. At this point, like, yeah, how do you go about that with the actual build of the website? Do you help people just figure out what's most important as far as like image resolution and the basics of Divi with font choices and stuff like that? Or what does that look like?
Yeah, so what I like to do, you know, previously, like in sort of the earlier modules, we've sort of gone through and figured out font choices and talked about Google fonts and, you know, benefits in those and stuff like that. And by the time we sort of get to the build, potentially as designers, they might have already designed their homepage or something in, you know, Photoshop or Illustrator or XD or whatever program they want. Often, like, I'm sort of like, sometimes I'll design first, sometimes I'll just build straight in the browser. It really depends. But I find a lot of designers, you'd feel more comfortable just designing something first, or at least putting together a wireframe. Like, absolutely do a wireframe before you start diving into Divi, because otherwise you're just not going to know what you want to do. And yeah, the build really is starting out with the homepage. And just, if you're just starting out, sometimes I think using one of Divi's pre-made layouts is like an excellent place to start, because you can go, okay, this is going to roughly fit, and you can start learning the builder and how it all works and how duplicating works and dragging things around and how they've set up the different things. Like, you might see a really cool design for a hero image. It's like, how does that work? So when you load the layout, you can see, oh, they've done 2 columns and they've put this kind of module here. And so I definitely think that's a great idea to do to begin with if you're trying to get used to the builder.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was curious on your process personally as to whether you do advanced wireframing or like a really advanced design like Photoshop before taking it into Divi, because that's the big question. Everyone's always curious. Do you do some sort of wireframe design before bringing it into the website? And I do agree. I think it's really important to have at least a structure in place in your mind. My wireframes look like my 2-year-old daughter sketched them out. They're like very bad. I just want to list out like the sections of kind of where everything's going to be. And then I tend to go right into Divi. Now, I've been designing websites for so long that that's the way my mind works. But in the beginning, I think it is really valuable for graphic designers and print designers to lay it out in Illustrator or Photoshop. And then they can kind of replace, you know, they can take it to web from there. So I do think that's very valuable. I will say, however, from a client perspective, I don't know your experience on this, but I've found that wireframes, clients just don't get it. They can't see a wireframe and understand what the site's going to look like. I always preview our designs as a live website, even if it's just one page. That way people can see the flow, they can see the animations and the subtle, if we do like a parallax background, they can be like, oh, wow, that's really cool. There's stuff like that that I've found to be invaluable as opposed to like a flat mock-up personally. But
Yeah,
either way,
absolutely.
the build,
Yeah.
it can work a variety of different ways, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm similar to you, and I just really, depending on the client, I'll do it different ways. And so, like, like for instance, in the course, like if they're my students are designing and building a website for themselves. So really, it's up to their preference what's going to work better for their brain, and potentially because they're designers, they're probably better and they're probably used to designing websites, just not building them. Then they feel comfortable, okay, using Illustrator or something, designing the website, and then trying to replicate that, which I think is a good process to begin with until you're used to the tools like we are. But for clients, for instance, like I'm like you, if I just need to nut out a wireframe, I just need to get, okay, I've got all the content and I've got the goals. I just need to scribble it down on a page and know where things will go. And mine, like I share it in my WordCamp talk, and it's like, you can have a beautiful wireframe like this, or this is my wireframe. And it's like, it literally doesn't make sense to anyone but me. I do not send that to my client. Like it's just for my brain. And if I feel like a client needs a wireframe, like I need to just double check something, then I'll make sure I do something a bit neater. And one thing I found too with Divi, I love how they've got all the placeholder content now. So you can whip together a wireframe like super easy in Divi, just like rather than scribble. And you need something a bit like fancier than just to scribble on a piece of paper. So
great point. Yeah, the modules. Yeah, you could just do image module, text module, blurb module, image module, and that's the wireframe there. That's all pre-built with just a placeholder. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've done that for some clients, and because I've looked at so many different like wireframing mind map tools on the internet, and it's just, I find them just quite complicated. They weren't quite what I needed. And so when Divi brought out with the whole placeholder content, it's like, oh, this is like so easy. You can just like whip up a wireframe in a couple of minutes and send that to a client. So
yeah, that's great. And then that leads us to the last couple of points, which is you label the fit out, which is a term that I'm not really familiar with in Ohio, but would that be like, the getting into the weeds, like doing all the actual content, library items, global sections, stuff like that?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I didn't know that might be an Aussie term, but the fit out means fitting out the house with like doing all the interiors and stuff. Like you sort of did the build, and now you've got to like fit it out. Yeah,
it might be a home term or some sort of decorative term. I obviously don't know. You could look at my office and tell that I'm not an interior decorator, so I have no idea if that's a term that's just AU or if it's in that space. But I kind of figured it was like, okay, building out the whole thing at this point.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, though. I might have to look at that because maybe it's confusing all my non-Australian people. But yeah, with the fit out. So once you've sort of built the homepage, so my process is build the homepage. I usually would send that to a client and the great thing, like you said, when it's Divi, it's like a live mock-up. So there's no guessing. They're not looking at a JPEG and like trying to figure out how big everything needs to be and how things are going to work. It's all there for them. And then with the fit out, by the time I've like then built the homepage, I'll make that all responsive. So once that's approved, then I go through and make it responsive. So that's another thing of my process is like, don't play around with like making it look all good on mobile and stuff to begin with, because you can waste so much time doing that. And the client goes, oh, I don't like that section.
Right. And that's the big problem. I always let my clients know from the get-go, do not look at this on the phone yet. We're going to do desktop first, and then we'll do mobile, because inevitably someone will be like, yeah, it looks weird on my phone. I'm like, well, we haven't even touched it. I haven't touched that yet. We haven't crossed that bridge.
Yeah. So I think that's a good tip, because I've wasted so much time doing that. And so then once the homepage is approved, then I will make it all responsive, thoroughly test just the homepage. And then because that's when you probably want to start saving your library items, like things you're going to repeat on other pages, whether
Yep.
that's like a call to action section or a testimonial slider or whatever. And you're going to want to save them and make sure that they're all right from the beginning before you start duplicating them throughout the site. And then you have to edit the responsiveness everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the beauty about Divi and CSS for that matter is you can do things that are global across all pages. That way you don't have to go to 20 different pages. I remember when I first got started with Dreamweaver, I created a template. And then anytime I wanted to do a change, I had to go into every page and make that change. And oh, what a nightmare.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
that's huge, the actual build out. And then finally, step 9, and obviously, like my web design process course is a 50-step process, although it goes through a lot of these kind of things in depth. But I like that this is like a clear-cut 9-step kind of process for designing a site. And wrapping up is what you call the tune-up, which is security. We talked about managed WP. I I think a big point about all this is also making sure like unnecessary images are cleared out, things are optimized. You talked about optimization for web. A lot of designers need to know the difference between a big image that it's fine to put on a poster or something, but you can't put that on the website. So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you have any other tips for people, kind of capping off their website designs?
Yeah, so there's just a whole bunch of things you just want to sort of tidy up. And I have a free pre-flight checklist on my website as well.
Oh, awesome.
That it's part of this course, but it's all on there. So if anyone wants it, and really it goes through just all that tidying up. So like you said, deleting any unused images, deleting any unused plugins maybe that you didn't use, adding like a caching plugin, setting up Google Analytics and hooking all that up. What else have I got on there? Adding alt text to all your images as well. So I like to sort of wait to do the alt text at the end because, like you said, you'll go through and you'll delete a bunch of images. So it's like you would have just wasted all that time adding alt text. So I like to delete all the images I don't need, and then I'll go through and add all the alt text.
Great point. Yeah. And I'll link this in the show notes. But for anyone curious, they go to your website, they can just click on free stuff. And there you go. I see it on there. I have a free stuff page, but I need to make it more prominent on my site. But yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, really, that's great. Emma, that's like a great path that designers in particular can follow to make this less daunting because again, I understand when you're going from web to or print to web, it's a whole different ballgame. But these steps of, I'll just recap them real quick. The goals, number 1, figuring out your goals. Number 2, the goods, actually, getting everything together to actually create the site, the style. Number 3, number 4, the foundations, which is real fun stuff, domains, email, and all hosting and all that. But then the tools, Divi, WordPress, or actually, I guess tools would be, or Divi would be number 6, the secret weapon. But the tools would WordPress and basic plugins, the build, number 7, 8, the fit out, which I actually know what it means now. So that's cool. And then finally the tune up. Those are 9 great steps for, planning and building out a website. But then most importantly, perhaps as a bonus, which is the party. Now I know what that's all about. And I completely agree. Like, I think what's really important for all designers is to celebrate the project being completed. I guess I was going to ask you what that looks like, but yeah, any thoughts on partying after you get done with the build?
Yeah, so well, I guess one of the biggest things is getting it so it is celebrating it, getting it out there, sharing it with people. Definitely doing that, but also it's the whole, sharing it with the world, and you want, we don't just want your friends and stuff to find it. You want it to start getting found on Google potentially and stuff like that. So thinking about how you can really get your website out there, maybe setting up, your Google My Business page, things like that, hooking up your website that way, all that kind of stuff. So that, because people, and you probably get this from clients a lot, people just expect once their website's launched that it's just going to be number 1 on Google and, there it goes.
Right.
And it definitely doesn't work that way. And there, obviously you can put a lot of money into SEO, but there are a lot of free things you can do as well that can really help. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. It's really hard to explain that to clients and designers for that matter. Like a lot of times website designers, new website designers are like, why isn't my site ranking? And it's like, well, did you optimize it for SEO? Or, I mean, that's why I have my SEO course to talk about that in detail. But yeah, it's like,
Hmm.
you're not going to have overnight Google rankings. It's something that's going to take time and takes a lot of consistency and diligence and intentionality with building good content and stuff like that. So yeah, I totally agree. Um,
Absolutely. And I
but
think that's
yeah,
just kind of something that's like it's almost a conversation or something you need to mention. I even have it in my proposal, like other considerations with websites, like so that they're aware from the get-go that, yeah, I'm going to build them a website. It's going to be SEO friendly. It's going to have all these things like, built on WordPress and all this stuff that's going to help with their SEO. But I'm not an SEO expert. And if that's really important to them, that's something that they'll have to consider as well.
yeah,
Same
same
with
here.
website maintenance as well.
Yeah, those are my three
Mm.
services: web design, maintenance, and then SEO. Is we optimize the sites for SEO when we design them, but we generally don't do more than basic keyword research and optimization. And then we have ongoing SEO options moving forward for
Mm-hmm. Oh,
creating
cool.
more pages and all that kind of stuff. So that's worked out pretty
Mm-hmm.
well. And then for the designers who are good at copywriting, just side note, there's a huge opportunity to do ongoing work with SEO stuff for building more pages and doing copywriting and things like that. So,
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know you offered SEO as well. That's cool to
yep.
know.
Yeah, I've kind of taken a break on it. I did white label SEO where I partnered with a guy who did advanced SEO stuff. But now I just kind of do it as it's not secretive, but it's more lucrative. It's like if a
Mm-hmm.
client really wants to get better SEO rankings for certain things, we'll do like page builds with a retainer of hours and stuff like that for more ongoing kind of work, some recurring
Okay.
stuff. So,
Oh, cool.
all kinds of cool options, and that's one great thing for
Mm-hmm.
for web designers too. When you're going from print to where it's project to project, you could potentially have one really good month and a lot of terrible months. The same thing can happen in web design, but with web design there's a lot more potential for recurring revenue, different income streams, and it's just awesome. There's sky's the limit.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that things are changing is kind of daunting, but it also opens up a lot of opportunities, which is really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, because web maintenance wasn't something I even occurred to me like 5 years ago, really. Like
Yeah.
and now it's something that's so essential, especially in the world WordPress realm. So yeah, I think that it definitely is daunting for a lot of people, but it's also one of those things where, yeah, the recurring revenue is just unparalleled. You can't really get that in print unless you have ongoing, contracts with things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Good point. That is a huge benefit. Now, I will say one thing I do want to say too. I meant to mention this earlier, but I am not opposed to having print work alongside of web design work. I'm not sure what your take on that is, but I found that doing print work opened the door for a lot of other services. I would do a business card
Mhm.
for a business, and they're like, "Oh, shoot, you do websites too? Let's do that." I have since cut out my print work just because I'm not at that place anymore with our business or anything, but it did for the first handful of years. It was a really good path and avenue for me. I'm not sure what your
Mhm.
take on that is, but I would certainly like if somebody's good at print design and they can do great branding and logo, I would absolutely do that along with web design because then you can become kind of a one-stop shop for a lot of that.
Absolutely. No, it was hugely beneficial for me to begin with too, because so many clients would come to me just wanting their logo done. Like they might be a startup and they just want to get their logo on a business card or something like that. And they maybe weren't ready for a website right away, but then they would come to me 6 months later and need a website. So a lot of the time it was a foot in the door with those clients. Um, and even also offering that as well, lots of clients on the flip side would come to me for a website and they don't even have a logo yet, so you
Yeah.
kind of, it's like, well, we kind of need to sort that out. And rather than having to outsource that, being able to do that myself, I could sort of put together a package for them that was going to include everything.
Yeah, and that's great because you could control it. You can make more money by doing that, and then
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to wait 3 months for a logo to be designed or whatever. And then,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a great way to go. It's a really big leg. I think people who are going from print design to web design have a lot of benefits that are they may not know about. So I know you and I have experienced those. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, well,
Yeah.
hey, I wanted to wrap up with a kind of a final thought from you, but before we do, I'd love to just kind of plug your summit. Not only because I'll be a part of it, but I think it's really going to be cool for a lot of people. It sounds like I'm big on doing these kind of things. I plan to do one later this year myself, some sort of summit.
Oh,
So
cool.
keep you posted on that. But yeah, what is that? When is that? What's that look like? And what can people expect if they're interested in checking that out?
Yeah, cool. So it's called the Designer Boss Lady Digital Summit. But we still have male speakers like
I was
Josh
just going to
coming.
say, am I welcome?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get more men speaking, and hopefully we have some that are on the maybe list at the moment. So fingers crossed.
Well, let me know. I have a robust network of dude web designers that I would happily refer your way for it if you get to that point. So let me know.
Awesome. Yeah, I will. I'll have to double check the list today, see where we're coming at. But so it's a summit for designers of sort of any kind, so graphic design, print design, web design, and there's going to be a lot of international expert speakers like Josh talking on topics from web design to running a design business. We have copywriters, SEO experts, all that kind of people from a whole bunch of different backgrounds talking on a whole bunch of different topics, and it's completely free. So it's going to be over 3 days in the beginning, early July, I think from about July 8th to 12th. Don't quote me on that, but you can go to dblsummit.com and get all of the details about it, see all the speakers that we have locked in, and there'll be more announced soon, and you can get on the wait list. And yeah, it's all 100% free. There'll be talks on a whole bunch of different topics, and there'll also be a Q&A with all the speakers as well. So you'll be able to ask questions during the talks and be able to ask all these experts from all around the world, which I'm actually really nervous about talking to. And I was even nervous about emailing you about it. I'm just like, oh, it's so weird, like contacting all these people that I look up to. So it's going to be really awesome.
That's awesome, Emma. That's a great way to go. You're already, leveling up your brand in so many ways and becoming an authority. So I think I can't wait to see what it's going to do for you and your business and how much you're going to learn. That's going to be awesome. That's one thing I've learned with the podcast is I've learned so much and got so many different perspectives, which is invaluable, which you should definitely have a podcast. I'll tell you right now, maybe we'll talk afterwards, but you should definitely have a podcast.
It's on my list. It was on my list this year. And then I'm like, oh no, I think it's a 2021 thing, but I need to find out the podcast course that you did because you've done an epic job with your podcast. So
thank you. I'll give you the download. Yeah, I'm a huge proponent now just because of what it's done for my business. So I'll fill you in on that. And then, if you can shoot me the link for the summit, I'll make sure to put that in the show notes for people who listen to this before then. Cool. Really looking forward to that. And then, let's just wrap up. Do you have any sort of like final thought? If there's a web designer or a print designer who's like thinking about web, but maybe they're on the fence, maybe they're a little nervous. Do you just have like one thought that you would say that could help just kind of push them over the edge and just really get them fired up to do it?
Yeah, I think so much of what holds people back is just like the unknown and being scared of all this technical stuff. Like it can really scare you, and I totally get it. But just know that it's actually not that hard. Once you have the steps and, courses like Josh's and mine and, ones out there, they'll show you the steps that you can do this. And it doesn't have to be that scary. And I'm sure you've had it, Josh, with students in your course, and I've had it with ones in mine where they all of a sudden they're just like, oh, I have so much confidence now. Like you've just made it so easy, and now I know how to do that. And even if they forget it, they can still go back and refer to the steps and do it again. And it's not that hard. And I think another thing too is that a lot of developers might say that this should be left to developers, like building websites should be left to developers. And developers 100% have their place. I have a couple of techie web developers I work with, and they're awesome. But just to build out a basic website and harness the power of Divi, being a designer, you have such a valuable skill set to be able to be an awesome web designer, website builder using these
totally
tools.
Agree. Yeah, a lot of people, it's funny though, I wholeheartedly agree, because a lot of people ask me about PHP stuff and jQuery and coding. I'm like, all I know is CSS. That I like.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can tweak PHP a little bit, but I don't know a line of jQuery or JavaScript or
Mm,
anything. All I know
mhm.
is I know WordPress, Divi, and CSS, and that has helped me build a six-figure income over several years. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
That's a great point too, because I have a lot of designers like join my Facebook group or something like that, and I ask them a question: "What do you most want to learn?" And a lot of them will put in, "Oh, I want to learn JavaScript or coding or things like that." And it's really exciting when I can tell them, "You don't need to learn that stuff. Like if you want
Yeah.
to, all power to you. Go
Yeah,
for
you
it." But
can. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
But you
yeah,
don't need to
no,
to do
if
your
that
standard brochure type sites. Yeah.
Absolutely. And even like for me, I will build, even if I build bigger e-commerce sites and stuff like that, and I don't want to have to touch that techie stuff, then I'll just build out what I can. And I just make sure I factor into my quote, I'm going to have to pay my developer a few $100 at the end of the job to like
Yes. Yep.
do all that techie stuff for me, because I don't want to take on the responsibility of trying to figure out all that stuff. So,
Absolutely. Yep.
mhm.
Yeah. Well, Emma, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed talking with you. Super excited for your path and where you're at, where you've come from too. Like I said, I mean, we've been friends on Facebook for a little while, but I did not realize really what you have going on. I kind of just thought you were a designer in Australia. So to see your brand and what you have going is awesome. I'm really excited to see how that takes off for you. Really excited for the summit. And then I have a feeling this isn't going to be the only time I'll have you on the podcast. I'm sure we'll have some good talks in the future too. That sounds good.
Cool. That'd be awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was great to do it.
Maybe the next one will be with a time change. That way you don't have to get up at 5 a.m. or whenever you were up today. So
yeah. Or I'll make you get up that early and I can have
deal. I tell you what, deal. I'll get up early for the next one. That's what we'll do.
Okay. Cool.
All right, Emma. Talk soon. Thanks again.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.